Greetings, welcome to day 83 of Project Dig. Thanks for joining. Project Dig is a 2D automation survival sandbox game that I am developing entirely here on Twitch and uploading all the VODs to YouTube. We're making a custom C++ game engine, and we've been kind of jumping around a bunch. This last month has been a little off since I have a newborn. And at first we had a lot of help. In-laws came up to visit and they were helping, and yeah, but that help has kind of died down. And so that means that now we're needing to, we as in my wife and I, are having to really keep on top of the newborn and our 2.5-year-old daughter. So yeah, things are a little crazy, which means that as far as Project Dig goes, I'm like trying to work on it, and yeah, but schedule is definitely needing to be figured out. So I was working on Cellular Automata, and then I was like, let's put that on the back burner. We got water simulation working. It looks great. And instead of doing like all the other complex systems like temperature and whatnot, I decided to work on some other things for a while. Started working on lighting. Then I was like, you know what? I actually don't know exactly what we want to do here. So now let's jump ship once more and work on particles. Particles should be safe. Particles are kind of like a very generic thing. It's kind of independent of the game. Any 2D game just wants a particle system, and one particle system works well enough for pretty much any game. It's game agnostic. So I have written down a bunch of notes here, kind of thinking about what we are wanting to do with it, what are the features and properties, and I think we'll be pulling a lot of the Kriya particle system, Kriya game engine particle system over into our Siege Project Dig game engine. So these are just some features. Well, let me recap. Let me say, what is a particle system? So a particle system is just something that's responsible for updating and kind of creating, managing, destroying, whatever. Yeah, I guess really it's just managing particles, and particles are just like the little cool effects like fire or smoke or hit effect on whenever you hit a monster. There might be like a little particles coming off of it. Yeah, smoke is a really big one. Let's see what else. Other things like maybe you have a bunch of like little graphic sprites that are like moving, and they're like all coming to some focal point, like they're being attracted to it, an attractor. That is something I do with the chaos crafting for Kriya. So just stuff like that. Particles, you can do lots of different things with them. They are super useful, and they give a lot of like life to the game and just make it look a lot better. So particles are very useful. So that's what we'll be doing. So some of the features that we want, top of the list is tweenable properties. That just means that we can it's kind of the whole like tweening thing. Yeah, I guess there's multiple things. There's tweening, and then there's also randomness with them. So the tweening is something like, hey, we want to have the alpha slowly fade out over the last 2 seconds of this particle's lifetime. So the particle like kind of fades away. And so we want to be able to tween from full opacity to completely transparent. That's tweenable properties. Let's see here. Just doing some Creo work the other night or last night. Thinking emitter. I think if we just look for emitter, we can find some. This has a lot of emitters. Yeah, making it so it can like rotate for sure. Was looking to see some other stuff in here. Like what are some other good examples? Oh, scaling is a good one where you might have it so like you have the particle, maybe it starts really big and it shrinks down over time, or the inverse. But then there's also some other things that you know what I should do is just load up Creo, and I can show you the main menu has a pretty good example of the particles. So you can see there are these like smaller particles in the background that are moving. Let the game load. Whee! And so they're kind of moving slower, and you can see that they're like kind of, I don't know, moving. And so a good thing, if you watch, like they will kind of fade in, and then they'll move for a while, and then they'll kind of fade out over time. And I think they also might shrink. And so it looks really nice, and that's all particles. So if we look at this, let me, I don't mind some music. Okay, there we go. So let's go to the main, I think it's menu, actually might just be the menu emitter. Background emitter, yeah. Where's this setup? Here we go. So there's the background. I think those are the smaller ones, and then the foreground, those are the larger ones. And so one really cool thing we have here is this thing called chaining, where you can have it tween, and then once it finishes that tween, it then will go to the next thing. So then we say, okay, first tween. So this is like a really cool system, which is why I want to use it. This right here basically says, first take the alpha, go from 0 to 128, so that's half opacity, and do that over 1 second. So that's the first thing it does. And then it says chain that. So then I guess it will just, does it really? Oh yeah, that's right, it's the delay. Yeah, so this says now, you know, go from 128 opacity to 0, and do that for 2 seconds, so it fades out a little bit slower than it fades in, but also delay doing this for 3 seconds. And so that way, you know, this is 1 second, and then we wait 3 seconds, and then we fade out for 2 seconds. And so it's total 6 seconds that it lives for. Hey, Miss Gimli. Welcome. How's it going with Dig? I haven't really been working on it. I've been mostly busy being a father. Yeah. Been busy. I did a little bit of Creo work last night since I had some time. And I've just been kind of like designing things out off stream. Yeah, how are you doing? So yeah, this is really cool. projectDIG, yes. projectDIG. Dig dad. Dig dad. Let's see here. So that's really cool. One thing that this system does is it will take the longest lifetime out of all of these properties, and so like this is 6 seconds long, and that's probably, oh, it actually has a particle life here. That's interesting. I wonder why I do that. This might not be necessary. But one thing it will do is automatically determine the particle life if I don't specify one. And it will then yeah, it will base it off of the property, the tween property that lasts the longest. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, we're looking at particles. So tweenable properties, those are super useful, and being able to chain the properties so that way you can have it like, hey, let's fade it in, do some stuff, and then fade it out. Or maybe we want to scale it up, do some stuff, and then scale it down. Or maybe scale it up a little bit, do some stuff, scale it up some more, do some other stuff, scale it down, fade it out, whatever. Like, we can do a bunch of stuff like that where we're like chaining them along. One thing that could be useful with this, not that, is if we're able to do things with the properties as far as like specifying when it's happening. So mostly I think it's tacking it onto the end. I'm not sure exactly what's the best way to do that. But right now, like, it's all based off of just like timing on things. So like, let's say that we wanted to make it so that it for the alpha, it grew, or sorry, not grew, it slowly became more opaque, and then once it became, you know, let's say in this case, this alpha, the background, it's 100%. So once it becomes 100% opacity or alpha, then maybe we want to do something like have it grow some, like scale up a little bit, or change the color. In order to do that, we have to like make sure that it lines up. We're like, oh, let's delay this by 1 second because we see that this duration is 1 second. Maybe it would be cool to be able to like attach these like almost like events to properties. I don't know exactly how we would want to go about doing that. This is just like an idea I'm throwing out, where you could say like, hey, whenever it's done doing this thing here, then let's have it so that it will change the color. So like we can have like these properties be queued up. So they could be like in these groups where you could say, hey, I want to do this stuff, and then after this stuff is done, I want to do this other stuff. So that could be cool. And maybe that's like how we would want to go about changing it, is instead of having it so that we have these properties that are set, it's more of like we have property changes that can be happening, and they can be grouped up where we're like, hey, I want to do these things, and whenever this is done, I want to move on to this next thing. If we don't care about the sequence so much, then we just put it all in one like property group. But if we want to have it happen sequentially, then we would just, you know, have each thing be in a different group. I could see that working out well. So maybe we can think about doing something like that. Haven't really thought about that until just now. But anyways, tweenable properties. That is something that we absolutely want. Attractors. So attractors was something I did not add into Korea until after 1.0. I think it was like 1.4 or something like that. So I can load up the game and show you what an attractor looks like for Korea. Showing off Korea. Oh wait. Here we go. This is fine. So we will just do that. I guess it didn't really matter. And so this, we'll see some particle effects happening up here. This is using an attractor to pull the particles into the... Let me kill this guy before he kills me. Go away. Okay. Those dust particles, or that death stuff, that was particles. But anyways, so you'll see some particles appear here. And what's actually really cool is that I have it so it appears on the bar and it comes off of the bar. And then it has an attractor. So you'll see that here. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a pretty weak one. If we... just really quick... This will make it so that we can innovate is super useful. Get all of the things. We are the master. Dang. Okay. Alright, so now we can craft again, and we'll be able to easily get up to... Oh, dang. Minus 40%, that was painful. Maybe I need to be a little bit smarter about this. Each skill plus 3. Dang. Entropy affects quality. That's next. No. Reverse entropy. Oh, that was close. Dang, we almost got up to 200. But anyways, this is fine. So we'll see more particles now. So that's especially the particles coming together. That is the attractor working. So basically what it does is it says, hey, particles that are moving, pull towards this thing. You know, move towards this. And so in Korea, that looks like particle emitter. It's pretty simple actually. Whenever it attracts a particle, it just says, hey, apply some force based off of the magnitude and basically move that thing towards the... It has this in acceleration, and so it moves it towards it. Moves it towards the attractor. So it's really simple, and you can have multiple attractors set up with... I think so. Yeah. You can have multiple attractors set up with the particle emitter. So you can have, like, I think, if I recall correctly, I have a few for the UI here. Huh? Particles. Okay, reveal particles. Here we go. Create on screen. So yeah, I actually have many attractors here. So basically what I do is we have this XP bar. Yeah, I'll just complete it so you can see. So we have this bar here that has a bunch of, this is where the particles can spawn from. And then I have these little attractors that are like above, I think they're just like above the bar, so it kind of pulls them up a little bit. But then I have, and so you can see they have a power of 40. So I have multiple attractors just above the bar. that are at 40. And then I have a big one that's much more powerful in the center here. And so we kind of pull the particles up, and then once they kind of get pulled up, they also get pulled over into this central point on the icon. And so that's all using the attractors. So that's pretty cool that, we can do stuff like that. Attractors are super neat. Another thing you can have that I did not add in Korea is a negative attractor, which is, it's not really a attractor. It's I'm blanking on what they call it. Let me see if I can find it. Let me look. Let's say attract. I don't remember what it's called. Repeller? Was it repeller? Okay. Hey, Polymark. No framework, just some libraries. Yeah, you can find what I'm using here at DIG. SDL, BGFX, Fmod, Spine, Lua with Sol 3, so on. How do you like Lua compared to Python? It depends on what I'm using it for. I like Lua in the fact that it's much slimmer, trimmed down. I don't really like the syntax for Lua as much. I'm not crazy about the syntax for Python either. But yeah, so if I'm writing a script, I prefer Python because it has a lot of utility libraries built in. If for games though, I think I do like using Lua more. Mostly because it's just so much faster. And Sol makes it a lot easier to implement it. So yeah, we could do like a repeller. So attractor / repeller. So that just pushes it away. So yeah, it would just be doing the opposite of what the attractor does, right? Where instead of applying a force that pulls it, it applies a force that pushes it away. So that might be cool to do. Animated sprites, so that just makes it so that we can play some animation. We did that with several things for Korea. So spawn. If you watch, whenever we hit the monster, it's kind of hard to see. You can see also whenever we hit it with magic, or I don't know, there's... That's a high level monster. So there's like a little particle. It's kind of like a particle. Wait, is it actually still a particle? Let me double check that. It might not be anymore. It was at one point. It's under FX. So like whenever we hit the monster, it's actually hard to see. We have something like this be played, and then yeah, so we have the CE file. Whoa, that's huge. Yeah, so this is an effect, template, effect. So that's a template, but what it does, frames, animation. Oh, never mind. That's not a particle anymore. Do we actually use this then? Night in the Woods developer killed himself because false accusations. Um, yeah. So I actually read an article by Scott Benson. I think that's his name. Yeah. Um. So like, I haven't been following it too much, but yeah, as Chet said, Alec Holoka committed suicide due to people like, yeah, just calling him out on stuff. But let me see if I can find it. This guy tweets a lot. But he Scott Benson is the other half of um Night in the Woods. And it sounds like after reading this article that he was like the driving force behind it. Like Alec was not as much of a driving force in it as it may appear. But that's an interesting article to read. You know, Scott Benson worked with Alec for sounds like 3 years or something. Or I guess it's more. He said he's known him for 6 years now. But yeah, it sounds like Alec did this to a lot of people. It sounds like he just had a lot of troubles in his life. Like, he was a troubled person. Like, you know, mental challenges. I don't know, or not mental. Like that sounds like he's mentally retarded, but like, you know, just depressed or something. I don't know. I never actually met Alec, so I don't know him. But yeah, it sounds like he was a talented guy that was also just troubled, and he you know passed on his troubles to other people. Don't know, dead person can't defend himself. Yeah, sure. But he seemed like a nice guy. I mean, anyone can seem like a nice guy, and I'm not saying he wasn't a nice guy. Maybe he was a nice guy sometimes. Um, and like I said, I don't know, but you know, there's a lot of people. I don't know why a lot of people like Scott Benson would come forward and say like, "Hey, yeah, I worked with him for years." Like, why? What would be the motivation for like calling Alec out after, you know, afterwards? I think Scott is just trying to shed some more light on like what happened. I'm sure he, you know, wished that how things turned out didn't actually happen, but he wanted to kind of. Most people seem like nice people. Yeah. I mean, I seem nice, right? Maybe. Yeah, it's easy to seem nice, and as I've seen some people say like saying, "Oh, but he's nice to me," or "He seemed nice," like that's defending the person. And I think like people, you know, kind of like our court system, people shouldn't be guilty until proven, or they're innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, you shouldn't like necessarily just completely like defend the person's actions because they were nice to you or they seem nice to other people or whatever. It's tricky. It's hard. It's been a kind of not so great week as far as indie stuff goes, especially in the Twitterverse. You know, lots of accusations and people being called out, which I think is a good thing. But I honestly completely disagree with calling people out on Twitter. Like, I think that is just not cool. No matter what they've done, like calling someone out is on Twitter or just social media. Hey, Mind Rage, what's up? It's just so destructive that, and you don't really know what's going to happen. Like if you know, if you're like one-on-one, you know, you tell a person you're not going to talk to them again, you kind of know like how that's going to happen. Like you have control of that situation. You know, if you hit someone, you know, punch them, you know the consequences of that action. For the most part. I mean, maybe you're One Punch Man and you kill them or something, but most likely, you know, like you kind of know at least the realm of the consequences. But whenever you call someone out on Twitter, it's just like you don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe it will kind of be ignored, or maybe it's gonna blow up, and then everyone is going to completely disown that person because they want to distance themselves as much as possible. And it's just like it's not cool. I don't think it's cool, at least. I think something needs to happen in regards to like trying to address these issues that, you know, people are being able to get away with abusing others, and, you know, whatever facet, sexually or emotionally, physically, whatever. But I don't think Twitter is a good place. I was actually talking to Andrew about this a little bit, and like I said, like I think it pretty much sums up like Twitter is for shorthand communication where you're just like telling someone some very short thing, like, hey, I'm going to be streaming, or hey, I'm going to be at this place, or hey, check out my new artwork I did, whatever. But it's not really a great place to try to tell people about this complex situation, like, hey, this guy abused me for years. Like that's all that can be kind of conveyed, or maybe like people try to throw in more, but you know, people don't typically read everything. Or hey, you know, my husband cheated on me, or whatever. It's like you give a small little snapshot of what happened, and then people just jump to conclusions, or you know, go on, you know, jump onto the bandwagon. And yeah, I just don't think it's good. But anyways, that's a super rant on something not related to Project Dig at all. Mark, 101 ways to waste your money. Number 1, sub to Jason. So much love. It overwhelms me. So anyways, coming back to particles, yeah, I think animating them, I'm actually kind of curious if we ever do that now. I think I support that, right? Maybe I don't. Maybe I decided not to do that. Animate. Okay. Let's look to see if I ever use .animate. Oh wait, that's not going to be what we want. .animate. Nope, never used it. Hey Mark, no worries. I know how it goes. Yeah. I don't know about this whole animated sprite. That might get scrapped, to be honest. Oops. That might get scrapped. Because I never used it for Korea. I don't know if that's like a common thing that games will do, is having an animated particle. I don't know. The thing is that it's kind of easy to add in, you know, retroactively. So maybe we could just do that. Hey, Kiruan, welcome to the siege. Thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, it's sub September, right? On Twitch here. So if you guys want to sub, I think there's like a special deal on it. I don't know. What the pitch? Yeah, anyways, providing light would be cool. Having it be illuminated or bloom effect, another cool stuff that would be nice. Physics collision would also be nice. These are some things that I do have in the Korea engine. And then an in-game editor. That's like probably almost at the top of the list. Oh, I skipped attaching to an entity. Yeah, I'd like to be able to attach to an entity, or maybe even specifically like a point on an entity. I think what I did for this was say attach to an entity and have some offset. So it's like, hey, this is offset from the player at this position or whatever. What would be nice is to be able to get a point on the player or on the entity from some like name or identifier, such as and I think mostly this would be useful for like a larger monster or something that's moving where I'm trying to think of a good example here. So maybe something like, let's say that you shoot a flaming arrow. And so we want this like fire particles to be coming off of the front of the arrow. Then what we could do is have it so that we could say, hey, this is the point on the arrow that we want to be having the particles coming off of. And it would be able to like calculate, as we shoot the arrow, it's being rotated based off of the direction that it's moving. And so, it arcs up and then it goes down. And we would want it to always be at the front, the tip of it. And so we could like say, oh, this is at the tip, and then rotate that based off of the entity. And maybe that could be like just part of this thing where we could say like, hey, this is an offset, and then apply the rotation or the matrix to it. I'm not completely sure about that. Got to give you some love there. Thanks again. So yeah, still have to kind of figure that out exactly how I want to do that. It's probably going to be based off of spine a little bit. So we might want to end up looking at that some. I think spine has like, it has bones, or it has like positions or something like that. Region. Like there's a bunch of stuff you can do with it. And so it might be like attachment. I don't know exactly. I would have to look at it some more. I haven't messed with this for a while. Path constraint. But yeah, it might be like based off of this, we can say, hey, get the sprite basically and apply this, transform to it to get our the final position for this entity. So we could say like, And on spine, I think you can do this where you can say like, hey, this hand has a point. So as the hand moves, that point is always being kind of like tracked, or it can be calculated. So we can just say, hey, give me the hand position, and then we could do that. Or like, I don't think we'd actually do this for the arrows, but if arrows were part of it, then we could say, hey, give this arrow. Or maybe we have this like huge monster that has like flame coming off of several different parts. So we could generate a bunch of emitters for each part, and then that emitter would be attached to the part. And so as that monster's moving, we could have the particle emitter, continue to move, or like its position be calculated based off of that position that it's attached to. So that's what I'm thinking for that. So as far as the actual implementation goes, what I'm thinking is that we'll have this particles component, which is a world component, and this is what's going to track all of the emitters that are currently running. And then those emitters will be able to share this like large pool of particles that are continuously recycled. The total number of particles an emitter may need is calculated and then allotted to the emitter. And then when the emitter is done, it kind of just like throws all the particles back onto this list. So that way we're not constantly allocating and deallocating all these particles. We just reuse them and have them in contiguous memory, which would also be very, very useful. And yeah, just kind of manage that huge pool of particles. I was thinking that we probably can have that be shared between all worlds, because we only really need it for the current character, right? So or for that character. So in that world, because particles are for the most part purely visual. They can provide some stuff, and maybe if we really wanted to, we could have particles move from the main world into the game world. Sorry, from the particle simulation to the real world. Like, that's something that Noita game does. Someone mentioned this GDC talk that happened earlier this year, and Noita is this like sandbox physics world where like every single pixel is basically being simulated, and one of the tricks that they do is they move they move the like things in the world between the simulation and the particles. And so like if you jump into some water, then it changes some of the water to go from the water simulation to particles, and those particles are then being simulated, and whenever they like hit a wall or whatever, then they go back to being water. And so they can kind of move freely outside of the simulation and then return back to the simulation when they're done. And so we could do something like that if we really wanted to, like fire and particles or something. Like maybe we could have fire and like every once in a while you have a fire burning, it can like shoot out like some sparks or whatever. And if those particles end up colliding with something like a plant that is flammable, or maybe a container, then suddenly that can go from being a particle to an explosion of fire or whatever. And so we can kind of like blur the line some between those if we really wanted to. I guess at that point, actually, then it would no longer be purely aesthetic. And that would, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. I think for now, at least, I won't plan on doing anything like that. Like, it sounds cool, but it adds a lot of potential complexity. Like, then suddenly the randomness that's being applied to the particles need to be synced up between the clients, because you don't know if, you know, like, if you have a fire burning and then some of the particles go and hit a barrel of oil and it's going to explode, you kind of want to show that that's happening not only on the server but also on the clients. Noita gets away with this by just not having multiplayer. Oh wait, no, I think they do. I think they do have multiplayer. I don't know. Did it come out? 600 in game? Did it come out today? No. Oh wow, there's a lot of people playing considering that it's not actually out yet. I'm trying to get to the actual game. There we go. I'm surprised that so many people are playing it. That's crazy. That's cool. Good for them. I don't know. Maybe they did like a Kickstarter or something. But anyways, you can see what the game looks like. I wanted to see, do they have multiplayer? Maybe not. It looks like maybe they don't. I thought I had seen something that had multiplayer, but maybe not. Because multiplayer would make this a lot more complicated because you could no longer, like, yeah, just the whole simulation, like everything being simulated would be so much harder to do. It's definitely possible, it's just harder. You'd have to make sure that it's very deterministic and that you have like this RNG that's, you know, synced up properly with the physics. I don't even know, like maybe every single particle would have its own like RNG thing or something. I don't know. I'm not completely sure how you would go about doing that. Maybe with noise-based RNG, because then that's a lot easier to like get the exact numbers. You could say like, hey, this is the offset of when this particle system was running, or I don't know. I think it would be hard to do with multiplayer, like having the particles be deterministic, which is more or less what you would want if you wanted to be able to actually have the particles mattering. As far as if you want RNG with it, which you absolutely do, otherwise like it's the particles are going to be the same every single time. Yeah, so I don't know. It sounds cool, but I don't know about that yet. Like trying to make that work. I think it's possible. I don't know. Anyways, so the particle systems is going to go through all the emitters. So there'll be a few things like probably be like add particle emitter to the world, and that just gets and adds it to the emitter component, and then maybe a few other things. I was thinking about having a particle component that gets attached to an entity, or that is an entity, but I don't know about that actually. I don't think I did that for It might not be all that useful. Let me look if I did this for, I think I did. So what I can do is just say particle color. That's for tiles. That's not gonna be it. Emitter. This is not, that's like creating an emitter. Oh no. Do I even have a particle component? Hello? I do. Let's look at template. Emits particles. Do I really not use that anywhere? Huh. Okay. Let's look for particle dot. Maybe I use that somewhere else. Probably not, but set up grappler particles. How is that working? So it's in grappler. Set up emitter. Huh. So that's maybe a place where it could have been used. So what this is doing is like every single frame on game update. Every single frame, it will create a particle emitter that emits like 3 particles at the grappler's position. I think I also do something for weapons like that. Oh, I could see like ignite. That's another one where it's like, okay, you have this like, you know, fiery monster that's roaming around, you know. It'd look nice if he actually like emitted fire particles, right? So some way to have this like running often. I don't know, like, so one of the challenges with that, especially if it is only happening while you are while you can see it, is like, how do I add it or remove it? I guess that would be part of the particle emitter, right? Or the particle system itself. That would make it so that, yeah, there's a lot of like added complexity to all of this. Like, so we have this particle system that what we kind of need to be doing is determining what particles should actually be on screen or being displayed. But we also need to like be able to sync it up with the clients. And so what you kind of want to do is be able to say, hey, this thing is wanting to emit these particles. You know, all of the potential clients, including the person hosting, who can also be a client, if it's not a dedicated server, that is, then we would want to have those actually be, you know, handling the particles, the emitter, only if they are on screen, right? So we need to sync to all of the clients. And so multiplayer is something that I haven't done yet, and I really need to figure out. Yeah. That needs to happen soon. So just thinking this through. We would say, hey, let's create this particle emitter. The host, then if it is the host, it says, okay, let's tell all of the clients that are nearby. You know, kind of maybe just even queue it up and say, hey, this is a new particle emitter that is happening. And then any of the clients can say, hey, I'm interested in that. Or basically, it would be more of like the server would determine if they are interested. It's like, hey, you are close by. You could potentially see this. Here is this information. And like maybe it always gives it to them if they are within the world. If they aren't in the world, then it won't give it to them. One of the challenges is if it's a long-running particle emitter, then that can make things a little trickier. Yeah, just thinking. I wonder if it almost makes sense to make it so that, like, what's the point of having the particle, now that I think about it, what's the point of having the particles component that's a world, instead of just having a new entity be created that, so we have like a particles component pool. Because that's essentially what this is going to be, right? The particles component is going to be more or less a component pool. So the difference is that we can have all of the particle components be, this is more or less like an emitter, or maybe like an emitter group or something. And so we could have it be on an entity, or maybe the emitter itself is just an entity that is, you know, its lifetime is the particle emitter. Hey Dallas, what's up? Give me 1 second, guys. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, Kaylee just ran into the room. She's like, ah! Anyways. How's it going, Dallas? Hope you're doing well. So yeah, I was just thinking like, hey, maybe instead of having a particles component that is responsible for tracking all of the emitters, maybe we could just have it so that the like pretty much acts this and say, hey, we have a particle component and that's it. And so that would make it so that we'd have to have each each particle emitter or particle group, and I haven't talked about groups, I'll talk about that in a minute, be its own entity, or it can be attached to another entity. Yeah, I don't know if I like that or not. That could work. So the benefits would be that then it might be a little easier to track the lifetime of the particle emitter, right? Or like even sync it up. I could see that. Nice, Dallas. I'm definitely interested. I'll take a look at that in just a few. I was actually looking at some stuff as well yesterday. So I am intrigued. Yeah, give me a few. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. Let's think about it because it could be worthwhile doing. So basically, let me fully explain this. Here's two possible scenarios. One is that we have this world component that is particles component. It's responsible for all of the particle emitters, and so you can like add emitters to it and remove them, update them, whatever, and then we would have a particle system that gets this particles component and does stuff on these. It would simulate them, it would update them all, it would determine which ones need to be rendered, that sort of thing. And so that's one way to do it. The other way would be to have a particle component, which is a entity component, and then we would have a component pool that's for the particle components. And so instead of having a single particles component, we would have lots and lots of particle components, and each particle component would be associated with an entity, and we would be like recycling this particle component, and then we would do a query on the world to get the particle components, and then we would go through all of those and so the particle system would iterate through them that way instead. So I guess the question is, what would be better? Let's see here. So one side thing I want to mention is this particle group. So particle emitter group is kind of like a group of particle emitters that are all associated and overlapping. That's something that I kind of should have realized we needed or wanted, but didn't add in for Korea. If we look at something like, there's so many places. Here's a really good example where we have these three different particle emitters here. So we have emit blue embers, glow 1 and glow 2, and they are emitting these different particles, doing all these different things. This one, it looks like it's a little bigger than this other one, or this one, it looks like it's scaled some in some weird way. It's like fatter. And so we have these three different particle emitters, and really this is like a group. We want them to be at the same place and, be kind of like they're associated. So eventually what I want to do is make it so that we have like where is that at? The in-game editor, and so you can like have some name or ID attached to the particle emitters, so that way you would be able to like have these all grouped up, and they'd be overlapping, and then we could, instead of having all of this, we could just say, hey, emit the purify particles or whatever, and we could do it by name. It could be converted into like a string hash, and that's it. And it would be like this entire group of particle emitters. And then this, we can see this is some other group that is, what's what the remove? Oh, it destroys these. I see. Because I think it is infinite. Yeah, the lifetime is -1. So we say, hey, let's remove these and then add in different ones. I see. I forgot about the lifetime -1. So yeah, I could see the group being super useful. There's this one cool looking program. Let me see if I can find it. It's like it's on itch.io. There we go. It's like the only site I've gone on to. This is really cool looking. I kind of wish I could use it. If you guys are interested, here's a link to it. But you can do this really cool stuff with it, like yeah, just being able to create all different types of particle emitters, and then also have it be like changing the palette, as you can see here. Here's some various particle emitters that are particle effects that they have. Super nice. The one problem with it and why I just don't use it is because like this is really cool that this is also pretty cool. Like this, they have an attractor in the center here. That's pretty cool too. Yeah. I wonder how they achieve this one. Anyways, I forgot what I was gonna say, but the main thing is that you can see this is actually lots of different particles. So we have like this bottom thing that this is like a little particle emitter at the bottom of this waterfall. That's just like have these little like water bubbles popping up. And then I'm guessing that there's another one at the top here that is just more white stuff that's kind of like goes up and then falls down some. And then you have like the main one, which is all of these big blue circles falling down and slowly changing color from a light blue to a darker blue. And then you probably have another particle emitter at the top that's like throwing out these small little water particles that are coming off of it that aren't part of the bigger one. And then there's, I think, also these like little star X's, the shiny things that are falling down. And maybe even the smaller, I don't know. Yeah, so I guess there's like 4 to 6 different particle emitters coming off of this thing. Maybe even more, I don't know. And so that's all like one group. And so, we're not making a game that would use this, but, imagine that we're making like a top-down kind of like a RPG system, or not RPG game like Final Fantasy 6 or whatever, using RPG Maker. It's same viewport. Then maybe this could be useful, where it could be like, oh, here's a waterfall, and maybe even being able to like specify like the length of it or something. I don't know about that. Being able to add in some variable into it would be hard because you don't know exactly where that variable is supposed to be going. I guess you could always just say, hey, this is variable 1, and then inside of the particle like system, you could have these inputs that would say, hey, variable 1 goes here, or arg1 goes here. Maybe that could just work. This probably has like 4 different particle emitters as well. So yeah, particle groups. I think that they're going to be useful, and then you could just specify all of them as a group. Yeah, so the question remains what. So yeah, this is a cool program. Oh, I think I was going to say the problem with it and why I don't use it is that they only have exporting. Of PNGs. Some people are unable to save a PPD project. Yeah, so I think it only gets saved as a PNG. And so it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to have, like, I'm kind of surprised they don't do this. I wonder why they don't. Is have some API. I guess it's just a lot of work to add in an API. But have an API that allows for the game engine to be doing this. So I could say, hey, here's all this data for it. Load up this, and it would just work. So that's actually kind of what I'm planning on doing, is having like my own API for it, or for what I make, and having an editor that's kind of similar to what they have here. Looks like they support like different channels. I don't know if that's what they call them, the particle emitter channels. That might be a good way to think about it. I don't know. So the question is world or entity? World or entity? I am not sure yet. Let's think about that a little bit more, but before I forget, let's take a look at completely sidetrack here for a few minutes. Hey Fergie, what's up? Dallas posted this PC build that he did, and I am interested. Wanted to respond because I have been looking. I was just yesterday looking at my own stuff. Oh, it looks like it did not save it. That's too bad. Yeah, so you can see like we're looking at buying the same processor. Which motherboard did you get? It's a pretty nice one, 200. I'm curious, do you have M2 hard drives? Like, it's funny, I had never heard of M2 before yesterday. Because I saw, like, I was looking on a motherboard and it's like M2 or something like that. And I'm like, wait, what's M2? Yeah, two of them. Nice. And like, oh, I completely missed that there's a new, like, hard drive solution. And then I was talking to my friend who's like, I forget exactly what he is. He is like high up in the IT. He's like CTO, I think, almost, at this like kind of larger company, and so he does all of the memory, or I don't know. He manages that side of things, like the um data center. And he's like, oh yeah, there's this new thing called um what was it again? P something. Let me look. I'm forgetting. Optane. There it is, not P. Optane. Which is like this new storage technology, he said, that melts and cools glass fast or slow. So they change the resistance, and that is how it like saves the memory. I don't even understand it. I would have to read more about it. But Optane, I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I'm like way behind. Where have I been? So yeah, looking forward to upgrading to that. I saw like you can get a terabyte of M2 for right now. It was on sale, at Newegg for $100. It's like what? And it's like I think it's 3 times faster than SSDs. I saw it was like 100, no, 1,800 Mbps, and then SSDs are like 500. But anyways, nice. This looks very similar to what I was kind of looking at. Yeah, I think I was even looking at this exact GPU. I think I may have been looking at a 2070. I had decided that a 2080 was like too high or too much. You want NVMe M2? I see. NVMe. So yeah, one of the reasons why I'm actually even looking at this here on stream is because I was thinking that in the future, we could. Wait, where is it at? External storage. Build a. That's for external. Where's the internal? Why am I not seeing that? Oh, storage. There we go. Storage. We could build a new computer here on stream at some point, and then like build it, pick out the parts, and then actually build it whenever the parts come in. So you say M2, but there's like 2280, 2260, 2242, 1100, or 110. I don't know, whatever. Like, which one? This guy explains it well? Oh, okay. Then I'll check that out.
All right, let's just take a minute to talk about
M2 versus NVMe. Maybe they have it in here? No. Oh yeah, there's also the U2 stuff. The 2280, etc. sizes. That's what I was thinking. Because I saw like, you know, they come on different sizes and there's like different like screws or whatever that you can screw them in on the motherboard. Yeah, so I'm like, I haven't built a new computer for 7 years, and so I'm like pretty outdated as far as this stuff goes. Like I was thinking Intel was still the leader with CPUs, but apparently it's not. Yeah, like 7 years ago is like you always would get an Intel. It's like, why would you get an AMD? And now it seems like it's almost flipped. Where I guess AMD is better for doing tasks, and Intel can be better for like gaming because it's not as good multi-threading or something. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Nice, nice. I was looking at. I wish I had the other parts that I wanted. I like this. That's a cool looking case. I like the nice, slick, simple design. Yeah, that looks really nice. I don't know. I'll find it. It was on my laptop, so nice. Yeah. I definitely was looking at something very similar to this. I see you went with all white, but then you got a black motherboard. What's up with that? What's up with this glow over here? Yeah, I saw. Let's see. I can find it really quick. Was it that one? I think it might have been that one I was looking at. It's really nice looking too. I like the very like slick design. The white box. I think the I one is like it has colored stuff. I forget what the difference was. Nice RGB strips. Yeah, I think this comes with the RGB strips or something like that. I don't know. But there was also, what was the motherboard I was looking at? It might have been this one. Maybe. Yeah, I thought this one looked pretty cool. There's like the M2 stuff. There's the 2280, 2260. Yeah. $22,110. How many software engineers to make an indie game? It depends on the game. But yeah, I like that motherboard. I like the look. I don't know if it satisfies everything I want, but yeah. Anyways, I'm still holding off on getting a new computer. I'm thinking Labor Day, not Labor Day, Black Friday. Labor Day just happened. So yeah, Black Friday. Maybe we could pick out the parts before then, so that way I have a few like possibilities, because I'd like to try to get this stuff on sale because I'm cheap. and then buy what's on sale, and then like the week after or whatever, Black Friday, then we can put it together on stream. That could be cool. Oops. What about your game? Software engineers, one or two, really? I don't know. I mean, like, it depends on how quickly you want to develop it as well. Like, there is definitely some, you know, uh, overhead cost to adding in developers. And so eventually you're going to get to the point, if you keep on adding in more and more developers, that the overhead cost is not worth it. They're going to be stepping on each other's toes. But like, I'd say 1 to 3, but it really depends on how quickly you want the game to be developed. One person, maybe it takes 2 or 3 years, or whatever, 2 years. You add in another person, so you have 2 people, then now maybe it's a year and a half. You add in another person, maybe it takes 1 year. So it's like, it's not necessarily going to, I would say, like, whenever you add in another developer, you like multiply the amount of time it's going to take by like 60% or something, or 65%. So it's like, it reduces it by like 35%. So it's not like cutting it in half like you might think. So there's like diminishing returns as you add in more and more developers. I would not say more than 3. Like, I would say probably just 2 is good. But it really depends on like the text that you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, and like also once you release the game, how much you're planning on updating it, and the velocity that you need to maintain to be able to put out updates at such a cadence that's engaging the community. If you are doing a games as a service type of develop or game, it really depends on so many factors. But also, like, you don't want too many developer, or you need to balance it with other people. If you have 5 developers on a team and just 1 artist, then you're probably going to be bottlenecked on your artwork, unless you have the majority of your art being like procedurally generated or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into determining how many people should really be on a project. I don't claim to have the answers. Still trying to figure that stuff out. Is this you right now? I know how that goes. Sometimes that's best, especially if you're early in the development process and you're still trying to figure things out. The like pre-production period, you typically want very few people on that. Like, I know, what I've heard is that what a lot of game studios will do is have a few people kind of break off of a development. Maybe they're kind of finishing up the current game. A lot of it's already been designed, and they're kind of just wrapping things up. They'll have some of the people break off of that team and start prototyping and doing pre-production for the next game. So they're kind of trying to figure that out, because that takes a while and you don't really need that many people to kind of figure things out. And then eventually they will get to the point where you want to start the production, and that's when you ramp up and you bring more people on. Aren't there engineers that are so fast they're like 3 programmers? I mean, are there good programmers and bad programmers? Sure. Is a good programmer or like an awesome programmer faster than a really bad programmer? Yeah, I think a really bad programmer can actually provide negative value to a project where they end up breaking things and causing the other programmers to have to try to fix it. So yeah, I think that there are programmers that are better than other programmers by 3 times or more. But I would say a great programmer is not necessarily 3 times faster than a okay programmer. Okay, so yeah, particles component, which is a world component, versus particle component, which is an entity. So the one thing I do kind of like about having the particle component be its own entity is then we could do other things with it. Like, let's say we could have a transform component, and then we could do whatever we want with the transform component. And so we could easily like look at that stuff. You know, we could say like, hey, this is an yeah, this is, we want to move this, we want to tween it or whatever, moving the transform component, do whatever. We could easily do that. It probably would not have its own render component. It would be like different because particle component, like particles need to be rendered, or they can be greatly optimized in how they're rendered. Let's see here. What else? What other types of components could we utilize? Just trying to think. I guess the best way to do this is go to registration. CP. This is where I have like pretty much all of my components. I'm just thinking like, what else would our particle component actually care about? It's like, it would be cool to be able to say like, oh yeah, it has a particle component and a physics component, and so it's treated that special way. But like, it kind of doesn't actually behave like that. I guess what we could do is say, oh, this has a physics particle component or particle physics component, which then gives it these other capabilities. I kind of like that. Or we could say, hey, this is a particle light component. And so then that makes it so that it has special, you know, it has lighting support. I do like that. I could see that being useful. So that's this stuff here, basically. I guess if we wanted to, we could also say it's animated. I don't know about that. I guess that wouldn't quite work because that is information that would be per... Yeah, I guess that's true for the physics as well. Right? Maybe not. Maybe it would be okay. Because the animated sprite, that's actually like, we need to be saving some information with that, right? Per particle, it needs to know like how long it's been living and everything. I think so. So like the particle itself would be different. Anyways, let's go back to this. So these are all the components that are in the game. So I just wanted to look at them and see like, is there anything that makes sense? Where it would be like, oh, we should definitely have this on the entity. Like it wouldn't. I guess like thinking about it more, that is another cool thing is that we could easily extend it where we could be like, hey, this is now part of this other system. Or hey, we want it to be synced up on the network. I think it makes sense to actually have it so that each particle emitter is its own entity or emitter group. Or what I might do is call it a particle emitter and then have different channels, and every single channel within the particle emitter can do, or we can have like multiple channels and they can do different stuff. Like that's kind of like what it looks like here, and I could see that making sense. Or, you know, like if we look at this, I was saying that it has like these 5 different channels, or it's maybe 5 or 6. You know, the stuff at the top, the white particles on the bottom, the big blue circles going down, the small little particles bouncing off of the top. I think there's something similar on the bottom here where they're being thrown off to the side as well. The like little shiny stuff that's falling down on top of the water. So there's lots of different like, channels. And so we could say, hey, you know, each particle component has a particle emitter, and each particle emitter has a, you know, 10 different channels that it can have. Maybe some arbitrary number of channels, and you can just add or remove the channels. I could see that working. And so then, yeah, the cool thing is that this would make it so that we could still easily iterate over all of the particle components in our particle system. And then we could also do things like extend what the entity is capable of. And we could, you know, say, oh, let's tween it, you know, move it around. You know, whenever we render it, we're just rendering it. We could have it so that the particle, no, we wouldn't want to do that. Yeah, that's fine. I guess what we would do for that is we would have to say, hey, give us all of the particle component. Yeah, this is one thing I guess that kind of sucks is that every single particle emitter would have its own, or particle component would also want the transform component as well. I suppose one thing we could do is then we could, if we, I don't know if we would want to do this, but we could say that the transform data is on the particle component itself to reduce that. So we would just put the x and y coordinates on it. So if we go over to our component, here's our transform component. The bounds, the scale, the origin, the angle. Yeah, so like for this, we probably would want it to be different. Like do we care? I don't think we actually want most of that. So it could make sense to say, hey, we actually, the particle component has the x and y coordinate as well as, or maybe just like a vector. So it has a vector, which is the position, and then the particle emitter itself. Yeah. One thing I was thinking about doing we might want to consider having it so we have like two different types of components. One that is like the particle component whenever it's active, and then another one whenever it's inactive. I could see that working. Like maybe we have a particle component which is, hey, here's the information on what this how this entity would have a particle emitter. And then we have some database of all of the particle emitters, and whenever we say, hey, I want to use this particle emitter, this water or this fire, a torch or whatever, then and so that means that the particle component can be extremely slim. Like maybe it's just the number, which is the particle emitter ID. And then whenever we add whenever it becomes active, so we could have like the position of the emitter. Whenever we're like, hey, this is close enough on the screen or whatever, then what we could do is add the emitter component to the entity, and then suddenly we would be using that. And that's what would contain all of the data. I have to think about that, how that would work. Hey, Summith, how's it going? So yeah, that might work. Let's keep sketching this stuff out. I'd like to kind of get this design out. Maybe that's all we're going to be doing today. And then that way, whenever we start implementing it, we can just, go right after it and not have to like keep stopping and thinking about how we want to actually go about doing it. I was originally thinking of doing it this approach with the particles component, but I think there's actually good reason to do it this other way with the entity component instead. I'm doing good. Just trying to find time to get work done in this busy life. Thanks for asking. Good to hear that things are going well. Okay, so yeah, I think that might make sense. So we would have a particle, no, we would have like an emitter component, which is also an entity. The one question about this is what does this look like? What do you mean by a component entity? An entity that holds that component? Yeah, so there's a world component, which is it's attached to the world, and so each world, which is kind of like a map or a realm, that has exactly one component, and then there's an entity component, which is what is the more like traditional component, where every single component is associated with an entity. And typically, only one component of a type can be associated, or I guess I should say an entity can only be associated with one component of a certain type. So like we could only have one emitter component associated with an entity. So actually one cool thing about this, if we do it this way, is that before I had this concept of like an attach component, which is, and this would be a good reason to use the transform component, is that with the attach component, we can say, hey, this entity is attached to this other entity at this specific like bone or whatever. And so we could just use that same thing for the particle or the emitter component attached to the entity. So we could say, hey, this entity is just attached here and it's getting updated. So like if we had, a sword that is attached to the entity, this actually gets kind of crazy because we'd have a sword attached to the player's hand. They could be swinging it, and so that's being updated. And then the sword itself can have an entity attached to it that could be the particle emitter or whatever. But yeah, I'm thinking what does this look like exactly? Because we then need the particle emitter itself, right? Like we need all of this stuff. There's a lot that could be associated with that. Yeah. Give me 1 minute, guys. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. So, we're working on particle system and trying to figure out exactly how we want to design this code-wise. That way, we can have it be as flexible as possible. Be able to do as many cool things with it as we can. So what I'm thinking is that whenever we want to create a new particle emitter, we're just creating a new entity from it. So one thing I don't like about this is then that means that I guess we could have the entities be generated, but we have this, I forget what I call it in here. In projectDIG, we have our data. What are they called? Oh, prefabs. That's right. They're called prefabs. So I don't want to have to make a prefab for every single emitter or particle emitter. And let's say we have a torch that has particles coming off of it. We might actually just have that emitter be on the torch itself. Trying to think of other scenarios. Let's say we hit some dirt with our pickaxe. We have some dirt particles fly off of it, or we're hitting a tree, and the tree particle, we have some wood chips fly off. Then I don't want to have to create a new particle. I guess that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about. Yeah, so I don't want to have to create a new prefab for every single instance of that. So I guess what our system could do is automatically like create these entities, particle emitter entity, so we could, whenever we are like, hey, let's create this, new entity that is like wood chips, then we could like that would automatically be added, like a wood chip emitter. Maybe that's what we would like. We would have the name like emitter be prefixed or suffixed, or I don't know, some affix. So we could say, oh, this is an emitter wood chips. And so that's the entity name, and so, or the prefab. So we could say, oh yeah, let's just create a new instance of this prefab emitter wood chips, and this would automatically be added to our prefab I forget what we call it, prefab stash or whatever, prefab system from our database of particle emitters, which is being created with the in-game editor. And so the in-game editor, yeah, will have a way to add new particle emitters to it. The emitters will have different channels. And then I think that's what I want to call it, particle emitter channel. Maybe we'll do it like this. Call it as a channel. Channels. Maybe we could just do that. I don't know where this would actually go. So let's say like the particle editor generates a, I don't know if generates, saves all emitters into a database. When the engine loads this database, and a prefab entry for each emitter is added, supporting easy creation of an entity emitter. Maybe I should say emitter entity. Yeah, so just something like that. Emitter wood chips. Okay. So I think that makes sense. Because I don't want to have to make those prefab files myself. But we could also have a particle component on entities such as a torch. So we could say, oh, the torch has a particle component, and the particle will just have something along the lines of a emitter name or ID. And I don't think we're going to actually have the transform be on it. So it would just be the emitter ID lookup in database. And maybe if we wanted to be active or not. That's one thing I was thinking about doing, is like making it so it could be active. Because it might be like sometimes, you know, our torch is underwater. We want it to be inactive, like it's not emitting particles. Would be other scenarios where we would want this an entity to generally have an emitter attached to it, but sometimes we would want to remove it or temporarily disable it. I don't know of too many. I guess that one that we're looking at earlier kind of would do that. This purify one, because this actually has a, you know, it's an emitter with 3 different channels on it, and we want it to be running. But then as soon as like you've successfully, like, I guess it's whenever it's done, it either emits fail particles or success particles. And that's going to look a little bit different. So we could have this particle emitter that's attached to the entity, and then we could I guess at that point, like, maybe we would disable it and then have a new entity that's on it, or maybe we would just say, hey, let's change this emitter, and that would like destroy the previous emitter. I don't know about that. Not sure about that one. What else actually would be like this? Torches. Torches is the only thing I can think of right now. So maybe it could have if it's active or not. I'm not sure about that. And then we have our emitter component. So active, so basically like the idea is that the particle component, maybe I should make a note of this. Contains information on how to create the emitter when it is in view. So this is a lightweight particle emitter. Excuse me. So it's just like, oh yeah, this will be a torch. Like fire particles, but it's not actually doing any of that. It doesn't have any of that information. It's very slim. And then whenever the particle or this entity gets on screen, at that point, we say, hey, let's give it an emitter component and actually have it be running. And so, yeah, and this is like the much heavier version of the component of the particle emitter. Like this actually contains all the data, you know, of like maybe all the properties and what they're currently doing, its state in general. That we would need to be tracking. And so yeah, sometimes we would not want this to be active, as I was saying, like whenever the torch goes underwater or something. Most of the time though, if it's on screen and it has a particle component, then we probably want it to be playing the particles. I guess there could be other scenarios, like maybe yeah, I don't know. The thing is that oftentimes if we actually want maybe like a monster, like let's say Ignite from Korea, if we had something like that in the game where it's like this entity, it's moving around, and we want to have like fire particles coming off of it. So it's pretty similar to the torch, but maybe like sometimes they will change their state. Like maybe sometimes they're aggressive, at night they're aggressive and there's fire particles coming off of it. It looks really cool. And then during the day, maybe it it cools down some and it kind of changes its state or whatever, and it isn't as on fire anymore. So it could kind of be like transitioning between those states. And so during the day, we would disable the particle component. We would just say, hey, this is no longer active. And whenever we deactivate the particle component, we could also, at the same time, remove the emitter component. So that gets cleared out. And so whenever it's on screen, it'll say like, hey, only iterate over the particle components that are active to see if we need to create the emitter component. And since it's inactive, we wouldn't check it anymore. And then whenever it gets to be nighttime again, we would just reactivate the particle component on that entity, and also, and then whenever it gets on screen again, we would say, hey, this is an active particle component, and it doesn't have an emitter component attached, so let's create a new emitter component and have that be running. And so the emitter component would actually be being added and removed from an entity regularly, I think. I think so. I think that makes sense because that's like, there's a lot more data associated with that. So we still have one problem, which is how do we handle customization of this stuff? And I think I kind of figured it out, which is, let's say that we hit we're like chopping down a tree with an axe, and we're hitting it and we want wood chips to come off. Maybe depending on the type of wood, like the tree, it would have a different colored particles. Like we could have like in Korea, we have the zebra tree, which has like a white bark. So it would be white particles flying off of it. Whereas for like an oak tree or whatever, it would be more of a brown color. If you're hitting blocks with a pickaxe, if it's like dirt, then you want it to be brown. If it's like gold, maybe it would be more of a gold color. And so that means that we want this like emitter, the same emitter, to be coming off of it, but we need to customize the emitter based off of some information. So we'd be creating a new entity based off of this prefab, but then we need to change it. And so what I'm thinking we could just do is exactly that. We would create the new entity. We say, hey, the player hit this block with a pickaxe. Let's create a new entity emitter, or emitter entity. And then once it's created, let's change something on it. We could then get the, maybe we have the color emitter properties. And so we could actually be able to do something with that. Say, hey, change the color to be this. And I think that would work. So basically, like, support changing the emitter in the code, like whenever we are creating the component. And yeah, so I think that makes sense. So we'd have the channels, and so I think each channel, I guess this would be plural, channels. Each channel would need to have like the properties, and I was thinking about changing this, and this is where it could get kind of complicated. I was thinking about having like a, like, I don't know if I want to call it like a property group. And so each property group is all property changes must complete before moving onto the next group. Hey Jeremy, how's it going, man? What's up? Welcome. So I don't know about this. Like, that could maybe work, but it could also be a little awkward at times. Where... yeah, I wonder... I've been super swamped with work. I've been super swamped with helping out with the kids. I can actually hear some fussing going on out in the living room right now. I might need to go AFK for a little bit and help out. All property changes must complete before moving on to the next group. Yeah, I think I like this. Going back to our menu that we're looking at, I'm just not sure if I... like, this could work. The challenge would be if we wanted the groups to not be... I guess we could have, like, group dependencies. Maybe that's what we would want. That's a lot of complexity, and I don't really know if it's worth it. So basically, we have some properties, like we're tweening them, this thing is happening, and then we want the group of property changes to finish before we do this other group of property changes. So we can have dependency on them. I could kind of see that working. So we could say like, hey, this property group, or this group of property changes doesn't happen until this other group has finished. So we say like, group 2 doesn't start until group 0 has finished. But then that could also make it so that it doesn't have to necessarily be all together. I think that makes sense. So then we wouldn't have to have that. It could also be nice to be able to say that this thing doesn't happen until the end of the particle life. Does that make sense? I guess it automatically determines when the particle life is ending. Yeah, maybe that's not necessary, or that might not be necessary. So what I'm thinking is that we can have groups of properties. Each property group can have a dependency on another group, which says this group will not start running its property changes until the other group has finished. And so we can have multiple groups running in parallel, but we can have dependencies on them. I guess there's one thing which is like, I don't think we would ever want to allow for multiple dependencies to occur. Right? That'd be harder to do. Yeah, that would be hard. I'm thinking about this. This adds a lot of complexity. I don't know how useful it actually would be. Like even this particle thing, this doesn't have that dependency either. Maybe this isn't really something we want. Like maybe just with like being able to add in delays. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure it's necessary. I'll be right back, guys. Alright, guys. Sorry to go AFK and then say I'm gonna stop the stream for now, but I need to go help with the kids. So I'll try to stream again tomorrow. We don't have a babysitter tomorrow. We did today, which is why I was actually able to stream. I will try to stream tomorrow. I'll definitely stream on Friday. I need to figure out the schedule. Kelly and I are still, working on this newborn schedule change. But yeah, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it. Feel free to follow if you're not following already. And like I said, I'll try to stream again tomorrow. I'll definitely be back on Friday. Have a good one, guys. Take care.